fair number of slides to get through, so we'll just, if you agree, we'll just jump right in. I'll mention that there were actually two things going on here at the radio site that we have restored. And the first one was part of Marconi's original business plan to interconnect the continents of the Earth by radio instead of by cable. And the Bolinas transmitter site that we're still using today was the transmitter site for the Pacific Link in that system. And the other thing is what we're going to be talking about this evening, which is maritime Morse code communication, ship to shore and shore to ship. And of course, we do go back to Guglielmo Marconi, and he did not invent radio, and he was not a scientist, he was not an engineer. And it's a good thing he wasn't, because all the scientists and engineers and academics were telling him, you're going down the wrong path here, because everybody knows that radio waves do not go around the curvature of the Earth. Radio waves don't go through dirt. Well, he was doing his experiments at his father's estate in Italy, and this is a fair evolution. This is several generations, I guess you would say versions would probably be better, of some of the apparatus that he was using. And here he's signaling across the garden. But then he was going a mile, he was going 10 miles, but going 100 miles. So we know for sure that the general thinking that you can't go over the horizon with radio waves just wasn't true. And so he proceeded along with his experiments, and his father said, well, this is obviously a dead end. Why don't you do something useful? You could drive a truck, or you could do something better than fooling around with this radio stuff. But his mother, who we see here, quite a formidable woman, as we see, had her own independent income, which was unusual for that time, because she was the heiress to the Jameson whiskey fortune in the UK. And so she said, you're my boy, I love you so much, I believe in what you're doing, here's my credit card, go down to Ham Radio Outlet, get whatever it is you need, put together your radio stuff. Now, that's the story that I've been telling for years, and I still tell it tonight because sometimes it gets a laugh, but it's not true. Just found out from reading this wonderful book, highly recommended, the biography of Marconi, fairly recently published, and it shows that far from not believing in his son, Guglielmo's father did believe in him. He was a financial supporter and business advisor, all through the early days of Marconi's work and incorporation. So the fact that his father didn't care, that's part of the standard Marconi canon that's repeated in many books and even repeated by me, but not right. Well, we're going to jump ahead. For quite a number of decades, Marconi had already established the viability of ship-to-shore radio communications. It was a known thing. It worked. And of course, it was highly resented by the captains of the ships who, prior to that, once they were out of sight of land, they were absolute masters of their domain. But now you've got this 18-year-old kid in a cabin up on the top deck. He's getting messages from shore telling you what you need to do next. And those messages were coming from coast stations like PH, later known as KPH, from the Palace Hotel. And here it is, the Palace Hotel. 1905, station PH was established. It was a United Wireless station at the time, and through various business machinations which were ongoing throughout Marconi's career and continue today, the American Marconi Company acquired the assets of United Wireless and included station PH up on the roof. We don't know exactly where, in San Francisco, on Market Street in San Francisco, 1905. And this is the only photo that we have of the interior of station PH, but still, we can identify various things here. The transmitter with its power switches and meters, And the send receive switch, these are standard. You'll see those in many different pictures of this era. So they not only switch the antenna, they also control the power to the transmitter. Receivers were passive, with usually a crystal detector, perhaps a carborundum detector, just depending on what era you're talking about. And these were great advances, even though we think of them as primitive today, over the original detectors that Marconi used, for example, in his first transatlantic communications, which were coherers. And there's a whole book, many books written about how coherers work. And over here is the receiving side. And it's a little hard to tell exactly what we've got going on here, but you see the tuning coil and various other stuff. So remember, again, passive, no amplification at all. You're hearing whatever energy you can snatch out of the air and detect with your crystal detector. Well, station established in 1905, 1906, not a good year for San Francisco. The Palace Hotel, among most of the buildings in downtown San Francisco and many other outlying areas of the city, was gutted, it was burned, and that was the end of PH. But by that time, it had been shown that ship-to-shore radio communications was a money-making proposition. So they moved the station to a shack, nice little building on Green Street in San Francisco. Now, for years, we knew that, but we really didn't know where. And then there appeared on Facebook this postcard. And of course, it's great to see the city in this post-earthquake period. But the thing that really got me is here's the mast for station PH, moved into this little shack here. And here's an actual photograph of it, maybe the one from which the postcard was derived. And I zoomed in a little bit, and you see that they have this enormously tall mast and a little wireless shack there. Rotary spark gap transmitter by this time. And even though this is 1906, 1907, and there are no television sets and there's no radios, and those of us of a certain age may remember during the time in the 50s and 60s when we were suffering from terrible television interference, putting all the neighbors' sets off the air and them hollering and yelling at the crazy ham radio operator, including me at the time. Well, there's no radios and televisions at this time, but the station is right in a residential neighborhood, as you see. And it's coming on the bed springs, coming in on the stove, it's coming in everywhere. And the folks are saying, look, we can't have it. You can't have this in the neighborhood. So they had to move. Here's another aspect of the station on Russian Hill in San Francisco. During that period in 1912, of course, the most famous maritime disaster occurred, the sinking in 1912 of the Titanic, the famous encounter with the iceberg. So, as usual, after a major accident, and still up till today, there'll be changes made in the regulations governing the shipping, and in our case, governing the radio, that are hoped to prevent a similar accident in the future. So the regulations were changed in the shipping area to say, okay, you got to have enough lifeboats for everyone. And the ship owners, of course, being notoriously cheap as they are today, they're saying, look, I don't know about that on the regulated stuff. No, you got to have enough lifeboats for everyone. So, okay, they went with that. And then the other, in the radio side, of little more interest to us, they established a specific frequency, or as they would have had it at the time, wavelength, that all ships would monitor at all times, all coast stations would monitor at all times. And that's 600 meters or 500 kc, kilocycles. Now, that's the wavelength that the Titanic was using anyway. It was already in wide use among the ships that were equipped with wireless. And that was great. That all worked great, but it wasn't good enough because everybody's on that channel. And of course, they're yapping away all the time. Since you know everybody is listening, if you need to call a coast station, you call them on that channel. And that was true right into up to a few years ago, 1999, when that ended. But okay, that was good, but now you're covering up this SOS, this poor guy who's trying to get out his SOS before the ship sinks. So they came up with these regulations, and here you see it marked on this clock. Now you had to have this radio room clock in your radio room, and it had to meet very stringent specifications, including these markings that we see on the face of the clock. Now these wedges at 15 minutes past the hour and 45 minutes past the hour, these are the silent period. Every ship, every coast station, every aircraft around the world had to remain silent during these 3 minutes twice an hour. And that's to make sure there's a silent period that the weak little SOS from some guy in distress somewhere on the ships, somewhere on the ocean at sea, he has a better chance of getting his SOS through. And that was good, but not good enough because, of course, you needed somebody to listen for those SOS calls. And most ships only had one radio operator, and he had to sleep sometime. You know, the funny thing is they hired a guy at sometimes who was only sat in that radio room after the radio operator went off duty and went to sleep. And he was just knew enough Morse code to be able to recognize an SOS. And he just sat there in that room. But that really wasn't very satisfactory. So what they did next, and the technology by that time had advanced to the point where you see these marks around the clock. These are 4-second dashes, and that's why the clocks all had to have sweep second hands. So here you are, you're the radio officer on this freighter, you're in the North Atlantic. It's the middle of December, the deck is covered with ice, you're listing at 45 degrees. The old man sticks his head in the radio shack and says, "Sparks, send the SOS. Here's our position." He slams the hatch shut and goes back to the bridge. Well, your job is to send these dashes, 4 seconds down, 1 second up, 4 seconds down, 1 second up, all the way around the clock. And why would you possibly do that? Well, it's because the technology had advanced to the point where they had auto alarm receivers on all the ships and some of the coast stations. And they would respond to 4 of these dashes. If they heard 4 of them in a row, they'd trip the alarm, the lights would light, the bell would ring. And the only way that you could turn off the alarm was to come into the radio shack. So you punch the button, turn off the alarm, and then listen on 500 and see if the SOS is anywhere near where you are. And if it is, then you tell the old man and head to the rescue. So that was a big improvement, and it really did help. And it's been replaced by automation these days, but maybe I'm prejudiced, but there was just nothing that beat having a really educated set of ears, guy who had listened to all this stuff for decades and knew what he was hearing, listening out for those SOS calls. And here's what it sounded like. Now listen to this guy. It's going to actually send the SOS. WOOH, if you copied that. That's David Ring was the operator that received the SOS and went to the rescue of that ship, and he's still with us. And you notice how the guy just sent the SOS properly, 3 letters together, not separate. So this is a recording from the Coast Guard, and it still gives me goosebumps to actually hear it. I was saying that they kicked KPH out of Green Street and moved to this location called Hillcrest. This is a hill above Daly City, just south of the city of San Francisco. And here in the distance, we're looking west here. In the foreground, you see the radio shack, which has gotten considerably larger. And in the distance, you see the Pacific Ocean and Lake Merced. All right, so keep this in mind. This is going to be important. the ocean in the background, and Lake Merced. Here are some other photographs of the shack, and you see that they had to have it tied down to the hill, to the ground, because of the winds in that area. And I can tell you, I am at about the altitude where that shack was, up in Marin County. I'm about 1,000 feet above the ocean. I can see the Pacific from where I'm sitting. And I can tell you that, especially during winter storms, you do feel like the whole place is about ready to let go. This is the interior of KPH as it was originally at that new location. And this was a photograph taken by Commander Richard Johnstone, who is a giant in radio and wireless of that time. And he wrote a book, San Francisco, my San Francisco and Wireless of the Waterfront. And I actually have a copy of it, and it's just fascinating. The problem that happened here is that the antenna got hit by lightning, so the stuff that we see here in this photograph, except maybe for the table, which looks very familiar, was all destroyed. So they had to rebuild it. And here is, yeah, the table. You see that drawer? Yeah, that's right. So the drawer, here's how it looked when they rebuilt it. This is Hillcrest in 1919, and you see a notation. I got this negative at a Hamfest, it was decades ago, and had it printed. And it's just fascinating. The more you look at it, the more you see. Here's the receiver, Marconi Model 106, if I have it correctly. Now, again, this is passive. This is a tuner, so not truly a receiver in the way we think of it today. A crystal just above the center tuning there. And here it is. This is what it looked like, the 106. And outboard, you had your audio amplifier. So, we talk about tubes. Well, they really were tube shaped. This is just a glass tube with wires coming out of each end. And I believe this is a stage of audio amplification. So again, now we're moving past the time of completely passive receiving, and you're able to get a little more amplification on the signals that you're hearing. A lot of other fascinating stuff here, and we'll get into it too, but I challenge you to tell me what this is. And the challenge is unfair, because it's really hard to see, and you wouldn't expect it. Now I'm going to go back again to that. And I will tell you, it is the grip of a revolver in its holster, nailed to the leg of the operating table. So we had okay, what's up? What is up with this? Why are these guys? We're thinking, okay, somebody's going to complain about the price of a radiogram. Oh yeah, well, take this. So Richard Johnstone, in his book, he talks about this installation, and he talks about the gun, the revolver. He says they used it to shoot their little black and white friends. That's how he quotes it. And the skunks. Now, last thing you want to do, in my mind, is shoot a skunk. I mean, that's not going to end up well for you. But that's what he said, so that's what he did. Now, this switch, keep this one in mind as well. Very important. When I first got this photograph, I recognized that obviously it's a big knife switch, but the function, well, I wasn't too sure about that, because that's the only photograph we had, and who knows what's going on behind that wall to the right. Well, we were very lucky. And then I got some photographs out of the same series of what is going on behind that wall, and here it is. Now, over here, this puzzled me for a little while. Then I realized this is the standby rotary spark gap. So you see the motor, you see the rotary gap sticking out to the left, the oscillation coils for it, and there's the gap. And here are the, as we would say then, condensers, or Leyden jars almost, but condensers as part of the oscillating circuit. And here you have your double pole, double throw, or maybe single throw knife switch to put power on the motor for the backup 500 kc spark gap. And here is the inside insulator for that big old knife switch. So now it becomes clear That nice switch is to cut the emergency transmitter into the antenna circuit. So now we know what that's for. Over here, the main transmitter, and you see the pancake oscillation coils. And we are restoring a spark transmitter right now that was actually converted to continuous wave, but it still retains a lot of its original nature and includes pancake coils. These were standard equipment on all the spark transmitters. And here are the capacitors down here as part of the oscillation circuit. So it had pretty good range. The station was a well-known on the coast, and KPH was one of the big stations that ships would work. So now back to our operating position. So now we know what this switch is for. This is your lightning switch. I actually have one of these somewhere. So they're mounted up on the ceiling, and you see you got the two ropes coming down that you use to open and close it. So if I guess they learned something when the first version of the station was struck by lightning. So if you think you're in a lightning storm, you pull the left-hand rope that brings up the arm, disconnects the antenna, and there's a grounding terminal that we can't quite see here that grounds the antenna. So that was a big deal. And here is the motor generator that runs the transmitter. Now, I can't be sure, but I'm pretty sure that the rotary gap, which we didn't see for the main transmitter when we were looking at those photographs before, is on the shaft of this motor generator. And that would be common. That is the way they did it. So we're thinking that's the case. And if so, it would be hellishly noisy for the operator here. These things are enormously loud. And I actually got to key one time. It was only a kilowatt, a small one. And that was enough to make me wish I had ear protection. And here's the way it looked from down below. So the two masts and the radio shack in between. Now, okay, here we are. Remember, we said, keep in mind, Pacific Ocean in the background, Lake Merced in the foreground. Okay, we got it? Okay, we got it. So now a colleague of mine and I, several years ago, decided we were going to try and find this site. So we drove south to Daly City, and we got up to where Hillcrest was. And what do we find? We find a gated community of beautiful homes. And that's exactly what you need on a location like that, because it's a spectacular view all the way around. But we didn't give up. We didn't get, radio archaeologists don't give up easy. So we started bushwhacking around the side of the hill, and then we found it. And here it is. This is the site in the depression that we see in the earlier photograph, and the ocean and Lake Merced in the background. So to us, this is truly sacred ground. And that's my colleague, Mike, standing there. We were very, very glad to be able to find this and document it. That was the, up until, you notice the date on those photos was 1920, the station moved here to Marin, where I am, and moved into the existing receive site that is for the point-to-point, the transoceanic Marconi intercontinental system. So they, by this time, RCA had taken over all the Marconi assets in the United States, and they consolidated both the point-to-point and the ship-to-shore in the single location. So this is the receive site in Marshall, which is actually just a few miles north of me, right on Tomales Bay here. And here's what it looked like inside in the first iteration of that station. And you see the guys here, they are dressed up for the photo, I think, unless they just dress that way every day. And they are wearing their Western Electric Model 509 Head Crusher headphones. And they are. I have several pairs. Man, an 8-hour day wearing those things, you'd be done. But the main thing that we're concerned about here is the receivers that they're looking at. You notice they're using bugs, same bug you can buy today. But the receivers are IP501, Radio Marine IP501 receivers. One for medium frequency, 600 meters, and then 2,300 meters, the longer wave ship to shore, which is still an existing band. And so we said, oh, and the other thing I wanted to point out, here's this sounder. This is a telegraph sounder, the kind you see in the Western movies. The guy's down at the train station, you hear that clicking noise, and he's writing down his telegrams. So they are connected to the transmitter site and to the central radio office in San Francisco by landline telegraph. Now, the thing is, as you guys probably know, the landline telegraph Morse code is different from the continental code that we use on the radio, even until today. So these guys had to be bilingual in Morse code. And we decided that we were going to look for a receiver. What you try to do if there's equipment, historically important equipment, that has disappeared. And we try and buy the same make and the same model to stand in for the missing equipment. And here is a IP501A. So it's not the exact thing, but it's super close. And it's in, excuse me, just superb condition inside and out. Had to pay an arm and a leg for it, but we loved it so much that we even commissioned this table that is, as you see, sitting on in the hallway of the current receive station. So we were very glad to get this, and it's fully working. It's a beautiful, beautiful set, all copper lined inside, really spectacular. It's got 3 tubes, a detector, and 2 stages of audio, so you could listen to the ships on the speaker. And this is the correct speaker. This is the one that we see in some other photographs. If you didn't want to wear those headphones, you'd be getting a little tired with the headphones. So that was a big deal. And here we see a later iteration of the station at Marshall, the receive site at Marshall. No transmitters here. This is all a receive site. So you see the IP501s now relegated up to the top shelf. And you see the 600-meter and 2,400-meter receivers on the 2 positions here. 725 meters, that is for direction finding. So that is also, although they didn't do direction finding here, there was a separate station on Point Reyes that did the direction finding for navigation for ships at sea. But again, you see the sounder, you see the bugs, just that we're using today, the mills, the typewriters, and the head crusher earphones, all ready to go. Now, for a long time, we did not know where on the grounds of the transmitter site in Bolinas the KPH transmitter was located. This picture appeared recently in a magazine. Actually, it was an older magazine, and we came across it. It identifies this as being at Marshall, but we knew right away that was not correct. And you can just tell by we know the terrain so well here, and you see the anchors for the antennas over on the left. We said, okay, this is it. This is the home ground. This is where the transmitter was for KPH in the Spark era. One of our guys wrote a paper on it, and he did the research to show, yes, here's the same terrain. All right, you see it. And the points show the road on the left, and then the one on the right, the pin on the right, where the road branches off. And as you see the branch there. So we finally found out where it was. Now we would love to go and stand on that sacred ground, but it's well overgrown. We'd have to do some real bushwhacking to get in there, but at least we know where it is. December 7th, 1941, a lazy, sunlit, beautiful day here in California, as it was in Oahu, in Hawaii. And things are going along just as they normally did. Not much in the way of traffic, but then the guys start receiving these incredible messages. And you see Frank Geisel, F. Geisel, the most famous station manager of KPH, was on duty. And they start getting these messages in. U.S. Army transport Cynthia Olson, the first U.S. ship to be torpedoed in the war. And that ship was lost, never seen again. There's a whole book written about it. But the main ones, you see, execute war plan 46 against, and for some reason they encode Japan, Secretary of the Navy. Japan has commenced air raid on Pearl Harbor. Air raid Pearl Harbor, this is no drill. So you can imagine what was going through the minds of these folks when they're hearing this stuff. But whatever was going through their minds and their hearts, they were professional radiomen, and they were filling out the log just as they were required to do. Now you see Frank Geisel, as I mentioned, was on duty here, and this log, when we began our project, we had the copies. That's what I'm trying to say. The copies of the log, good copies, but still copies. A number of years ago, I got a call from Gloria Geisel, Frank's daughter, and she said, "Richard, I need you to come and see me. I have something for you." And so, of course, I immediately went, and she handed me the original log, and you can imagine what that was like. So I very thankfully received this document from her and took it to the National Park Service Document Center, the archive, to make sure that it was going to be preserved, because you couldn't, this is not something you can keep in the box in the basement. You know, the pipe breaks or you get a leak or the rats eat it or whatever, and it's gone. So this went to the archivist, and they made excellent copies for us that we now have on display at the receive station, which is here. So after RCA took over the assets of Marconi, about that time, short waves were discovered. And the receive site at Point Reyes, rather at Marshall, the one we looked at earlier, that was not sufficient for a shortwave receive site, but there just were not enough, there's not enough flat land for all of the antennas that you needed, because now instead of one circuit on low frequency, long wavelength, super power across the Pacific, now you had multiple ones from all the cities of the Pacific Rim. And I remember seeing that when I first got there in 1972, that was still in service. So all these fantastic receivers, one for each city, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, all the names were above the receivers. And each one was connected to multiple antennas because they were space diversity antennas. So as the signal would fade on one antenna, it'd come up on another. But that's the story of the point-to-point. So we can get in that in another presentation if you would like. But after the war, this was built in 1930, and when shortwave became a viable option, commercially viable option. And the site was selected, by the way, by Dr. Harold Beveridge. And you may recognize him as the inventor of the Beveridge antenna. And I am very honored to say that I got to meet him. His home was on Long Island. He did most of his work in Riverhead at Radio Central on Long Island, New York, and I grew up there. I gave him a call, said, "Dr. Beveridge, you don't know me, but I know you, and I would like to come and pay my respects if you would permit that." Most gracious man, spent the afternoon in his study. You can imagine what that was like. Anyway, after the war, Second World War, RCA said to Frank Geisel, "Frank, we got to get KPH on the air again." It was closed during the war, as all the coast stations were. It was all military by that time, not civilian. But Frank, get KPH on the air. Let's get some revenue for the company and build the receive site, not at Marshall, move it from Marshall and install it here at the point-to-point receive station in Point Reyes, which is where we are today. And the station was in this front corner, and it was an interesting thing technically as well as socially, because the point-to-point guys, they were the elite. They were the ones who were very calm, very easygoing, not much going on, no hollering, no yelling, the elite. And here's these guys now coming back from the war. They've been at every ocean. They've seen everything. They're not taking anything from anybody. They're down there hollering and yelling and eating big fish sandwiches and squirting tobacco juice all over the place. They called them the den of thieves down there. So you have this social hierarchy that existed right until the end of the service. Well, here's two guys standing out in front of the receive site with Radio Marine Corporation of America Willie's utility wagon. And here's two guys standing out front there in front of the receive site in front of Willie's utility wagon. This one is mine. And when I saw that original photograph, I said, okay, we're going to letter mine just to replicate the one that we saw in the earlier picture. And we actually use this quite often, four-wheel drive and the winch and all the rest of it to do the work in the antenna fields. So that's me on the left and my co-founder, Tom Horsfall, on the right. So here's what it looked like. Everything that you need for a real radio station. You see the clock on the wall. We still have that clock, and it's got the markings on it. And now you know what those markings are. And there's one in front of each operator as well. Over on the left, you've got a HRO 5, and then the medium frequency AR 8510, I think. And then the receivers down below, the CR91s, and the two CR91s stacked over on the right side. And you notice that if you look closely, there's markings around the main tuning knob on the 91 that's on the left, and then there's a card around the main tuning knob of the top one on the right. And that's so they marked the calling and working frequencies for the ships, because it's always duplex. It's not like amateur radio where you're working on the same channel. It's always duplex. The coast station stays on the same frequency all the time, and then you work the ship on a separate frequency. So in order to go to those frequencies quickly, they marked them on the dial. They could just spin them and go right to where they needed to go. And here is the loop, a loop of punch paper tape in the Wheatstone code that sends out the what we call the wheel. And whenever you're not working a ship, you use that as a marker on all of your channels so that ships know that you're there and to call you. And it basically says, this is KPH, we're listening for you. Please give us a call. We want your business. So that's on there whenever you're not working a ship. So the guys who are out at sea and also have receivers that are not calibrated in the way we'd think of it today, but they can easily find you. They know about where you are. They tune in, they hear your marker. And we transmit on multiple frequencies on 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, and 22 megs. And the idea there is that in whatever the guy is and whatever ocean he is, that at least one of those channels is going to be coming in adequately. So he says, okay, 16 is no good. Let's go down to 12. Okay, pounding in on 12 megs, we're going to call him back on the 12 meg call-in channel. This was interesting. It took us a while to figure this out. We know what all the rest of the stuff is. Maybe there's some teletype guys among you. It took one of the teletype aficionados to tell us what this is. And he says, well, it's a teletype machine. Obviously, it's a Model 2B, 2 Bravo teletype machines. So you never find one. If you find one, you'll never restore it. If you restore it, you'll never find the tape for it. If you find the tape for it, you won't be able to use it because it's adhesive on the back and it'll all be a gelatinous mass. So you should give it up now. Well, you can imagine how we took that. And I'll just short circuit to say, well, we have a fully restored one with a lifetime supply of tape, fully operational in the operations room. But more important than that is, why is it here? That's the thing that's really important. This closed the circle. We have the reports of Frank Geisel from 46 and 47, and he's always complaining that the Western Union line is down. What the heck is going on with the Western Union line? Well, this is it. So if you needed to send a telegram to a ship and you're in a big city, you can go to the RCA office and file your radiogram. But if you're in the middle of the country somewhere, or some smaller town or city, they're not going to have an RCA office, but you can go to the Western Union office, file your telegram for the ship there. If it's for a ship in the Pacific, it prints out on this very machine, and you see those strips. It prints out the strips, and you paste those down on the telegram form, put it in the message rack, and when that ship calls, he's got his message. We move back to a larger space in the receive site. The point-to-point receivers upstairs were DC powered up to this point. So this area the whole width of the building was battery banks and motor generators to charge the batteries. But once the receivers upstairs were converted to AC, then that space became available, and KPH moved into much more spacious quarters. And here you see over on the left, this is the wheel. You see the loop over there, but this is also where you sent out things like weather reports and so forth. And you see the amazing pulley system that they had to guide these long messages. And we have there's the what they call the Klein. It's actually, it's not made by Kleinschmidt, but you still call it the Klein. That's just what you do. And you punch out the tape on that. And then when it's ready to be sent at a specific hour, and that's all listed, everybody knows when to listen, either the weather or the press or the traffic list, then you set it off. So this is the box that we see here. This is how it looked when we got it. And I should have included here a photograph of the restored version, because it looks great now. But it's a real, as we say, a real kludge. These guys just hacked this thing together. It's kind of embarrassing, really. But we've got it. That's the main thing. And we also have the Kleinschmidt perforators. And I started punching tape on this. And I saw one in operation for the first time down at KFS, the competing station, in 1972. And it took me a decade and more to finally find one. Now we have a dozen of them. But this one is mine. And I started punching tape on it. And I noticed, well, teletype, you have punch paper tape as well. And if you make an error, you can backspace and you can hit a certain key and block that out and correct your error. But here, there's no way to do that. And I'm scratching my head and I'm, punching tape, and man, what do you do? So I asked some of the guys who were still with us at that time, some of the guys who actually worked at the station. I said, guys, I'm punching tape on the Klein. And they would say, oh, yeah, good, that's good. And I said, well, but I don't know what to do. What did you guys do when you made a mistake? And of course, the room falls silent, and he looked at me in my eye. He said, well, we didn't make mistakes. So, okay, got it. Well, here's another view of the radio room. This is still in the tube era, as you see. This is Les Berger, and he is operating his bug, and here is his cable weight. Cable clamp used as a weight on his bug. And I said, man, if that's good enough for Les, that's good enough for me. Stuck that on my bug. And you see he's got his bug plugged in to the straight key on the desk. So every position had a straight key. Nobody used that. You connected your bug to the straight key with a connector called the cord and wedge. And we still have those. We still use them. He's wearing his earphones correctly in the forward position. All radio men wear them that way. So you get a big, strong signal or a crash of static. You don't blow out your eardrums. 51J4, the workhorse. Collins 51J4, contemporary with the amateur 75A4. And here you can still see markings on the dial. We have one of them, original to the station. I have one in my collection as well. Here we have a Drake 2B. Those of you of a certain vintage will remember this receiver as really an outstanding advance in reasonably low-cost amateur receivers. Well, what's this ham receiver doing at a commercial radio station? We puzzled over that. Well, it turns out, like I mentioned before, everything is duplex. So you're not hearing your own signal when you're sending. So guys, there is a side tone in the console. You could use that, but nobody liked it. Even to this day, nobody likes to use that. You always want to hear your signal off the air. And so the 2Bs, the segments that they tuned were governed by crystals inside the receiver. So they were modified to listen to the transmitters in Bolinas. And we have one of these that we've modified in just that way. So he's listening to his signal off the air. And he's transmitting with his right hand, he's writing with his left hand. And that's what a lot of guys tried to train themselves to do, because it's a constant ongoing process. Ships calling, got to get them in the log, got to get that message onto the next ship, onto the next ship. And here's another view of another position. This one, take a look at this. This is a BC 455. And in the 50s and 60s, we used to use these all the time. They were called the Q5er because they were low frequency receiver and they covered 455 KC, the IF of most radios. So back then, at least us in the beginning, we were using not very good receivers, but you could tune in the IF on this receiver and then you would have much, much more selectivity. But okay, that's not what's happening here. So what the heck is up with this guy? Well, this is the keying monitor for medium frequency. So you can tune to 500 KC and the working frequency of KPH 426. Okay, very good. Now, what happens? This happens a fair amount. Guy shows up at the station, says, you know, my dad or now my granddad used to work at KPH. He's got this thing that's been on the shelf in the garage for 40 years. You guys want it? And here it is, the very one, the exact one that we see in this photograph came home. And here you see it's got the working frequency 426 KC marked on the front, and 500 KC is also marked in red paint. So we were so glad to get this thing, and it's now come home, as I say. Well, here is when I first started at the project, I thought I was pretty good on the Morse code key, and I'll be honest with you, I was a fairly good operator, and had been a commercial operator as well, but not very long. And so then I come to this project, and I talked to the guys who did this for decades of their life, and I realized, okay, I've got more to learn here, and it's not just a matter of speed. It's a matter of technique and finesse and shorthand and procedure. And the guys who worked there all said, yeah, okay, I'm pretty good on my Morse code key. But this guy, he was the best. And his name is escaping me. It's going to come back to me. It always does it at this point. But he was a Quaker, and he could have honorably and legally sat out the Second World War. He didn't choose to do that. He chose to become a radio operator in the Merchant Marine. And those of you who are historians of World War II, you know what the casualty rate in the Merch was during the war. And him included, he got his ship torpedoed out from under him. In fact, there's a whole book about the submarine that did it called Operation Drumbeat. And he signed it. He says, this is the submarine that got me. He survived, came back to be the most skilled and most beloved operator at KPH. So here we see the receivers that he's using and the way the panel looked then. Here is this receiver. It's a Marconi Atalanta, fairly rare on this side of the pond. Notice this little tag here, this little sticker that's on the tuning on the slide dial right there. So this receiver was gone when we got there. This was used for medium freak. This receiver was gone when we got there. And like I told you, we like to find receivers that can stand in for the ones that are missing. And I did that. I found a Marconi Atalanta, perfect condition. Again, had to pay an arm and a leg for it. Beautiful receiver, very interesting design. But then I was stumbling around in a dimly lit basement of a location not far from where I'm sitting now, and I find this. Now, this is a flash photo. When I saw it originally, it was just a sort of a dark silhouette. It could have been a cardboard box, but somehow I knew, oh man, this is it. And obviously, this is the very same receiver that we see in the other photographs. So now we not only have the one that I bought, but we have the very one that was used. And again, I took it. I didn't steal it. I did take it at night, but I it was one of those things where they say, well, you know, the door is going to be open between 6 and 10 tonight. So I don't know if you have whatever you want to do, but we have it. And it's been fully restored, fully working. Another thing, BL11. Here's Ivan Nielsen, one of the great engineers. This is now at the transmitter set, Bolinas transmitter 11. This is the backup transmitter on 500, and you had to be on the air on 500 all the time. So if the main transmitter, which was a 40 kilowatt Morse code transmitter on 500, if that was down for maintenance or failed for some reason, BL11 would take over. This is in the tuning shack that we still use today. Well, when we got there, there was no BL11. Where did BL11 go? We don't see BL11. So we're grubbing around and looking for stuff, and I find the table for it that was on, but in that same basement, transmitter BL11, there it is. And you see up in the upper right, these grease pencil markings. These are the antenna currents that you would expect to get when this transmitter is properly tuned on 500 and 426. And again, I absconded with this one. So we have this on its proper table and it's undergoing restoration right now. There you see the markings for 426 and 500. Now, you might think, let's get some Formula 409 and clean this thing up. But of course, you'd never want to do that. This is what they call historic fabric in the museum business. A little wider view, things are stepping along now in the operating room. And by the way, you saw it in, Bill Maloney, the Quaker, the best Morse operator they ever saw, Bill Maloney. And in the photo of him, you see this thing over on the on top of the rack to the right, the cubby holes where all the keys are kept. So you come on duty, you get your key out of the cubby hole, and nobody messes with another man's key. That's for sure. That'd be a fist fight in the parking lot if you did that, because you just are adjusting it exactly as you want, like a musician adjusts his violin. So anyway, you get your key, you get your headphones, you plug in, 8 hours, ship after ship after ship. Some guys would go home, get on the handbands and work Morse code for another 8 hours, and then come back, sleep a little bit, come back and do it again. The main thing here is that you see this receiver. This is an HRO 500. This is the first solid state receiver that was used at the station. And we have several of them that were indigenous to the station, but being first generation and being used really hard. This is, you're tuning that thing all the time. It's on 24 hours a day. They are very difficult to restore, but we had a guy volunteer to do that. It took him a couple of years to do it. But we do have a fully operational receiver, the same one, might even be the one that's in this picture, that's in our inventory. And here, as I was talking about the cubby holes for the keys. Warren Reese, ladies and gentlemen, he is standing in front of the row of Henry HF 5000D Delta transmitters that replaced a lot of the replaced a lot of the 1950s vintage transmitters at the transmitter site in Bolinas. And you see him in his standard outfit. This is where he always was, bow tie, short sleeve shirt. And in his pocket, he's got his alignment tools, and he always had a dental floss applicator. He helped us a lot during the time we first got there, because even though we were used to working with old equipment and high-powered stuff and all the rest of it, this was another order of magnitude. Two sites, the receive site and the transmit site separate. How do you control them? How do you hook them up? What does this do? How does this work? So he was a tremendous help for us. And he was also a superb CW operator. You see him here. By that time, the mills, the typewriters had been replaced by electronic messaging system. He loved Morse code. And by the way, the model headphones he's wearing, the exact model I'm wearing right now. They're great for radio stuff. Well, the end had to come at some point, and here it is. On June 30th, 1997, this is the last message that was sent from KPH at the Bolinas and Point Reyes announcements. It's we wish you fair winds and following seas. 73, 88. By that time, there were female operators at the station. And that was an interesting thing because, there's really not very room and time for chatting. It's not like amateur radio. This is business. Every word is money. So you would get your message from the ship at sea and you'd say, okay, 73 OM, dit, dit, next guy. Once Denise got there in 1979, the first female operator, she would send, very 70, good to hear you, old man, see you again, 73 slant bar 88. And the guy on the ship went, did you say 88? Yes. Are you a YL? Yes. Okay, see you next time. And then the bouquets started showing up at the station, and occasionally the radio officer would show up. Well, even though operations at Bolinas and Point Reyes ended in 1997, the license was purchased by the competitor station KFS, and they operated KPH and KFS with a different transmitter location from their receive control point at Half Moon Bay. Here's Paul Zell, another operator's operator. This guy is just a master at the Morse code. And this is taken on July 12th, 1999, the supposed last day of Morse code. And we were all there, and it was a crowd. It was a real ceremony, and it was emotionally moving. And I wheedled these guys. Here's Paul Zell with the eye shade. In the middle is Ray Smith, senior Morse operator. He sent that message that you saw saying that KPH was closing down. And he also sent the inaugural message, not only when we got the station back onto the air under our own license, KSM, but when we got the KPH call sign back. And he sent the opening message saying KPH is back. And over on the right is Jack Martini, and he is the last station manager of KPH. It was up to him to close the joint down. So I'm wheedling these guys and saying, listen, can you, let me send some messages. What do you think? Can I do it? So they thought, okay, just to shut me up, I think. Said, okay, we'll let you send some of the closing messages. This is the last day of Morse, so you can imagine. And, people ask, why bother with this stuff? I mean, nobody uses it anymore. It's not commercially used. There's no way to make money in it. Of course, as amateurs, we use it and enjoy it, but that's a different thing. This is commercial, and it's just beeps in the air anyway. So what are you doing here? And it was this event that answered that question for me, because you looked around the room and here's these grizzled old buzzards, these guys who had been radio officers on every ocean of the world, had seen everything, had been through storms and shipwrecks. And you look at them; these are the guys that sit down at the end of the bar, and know enough not to mess with them. And they're weeping, and I was too, I have to admit. And Denise, she was there all in black because she's attending a funeral. So that's really the foundation for why we decided to go ahead with this project, to commemorate and honor those men and women. So here I am. I'm going to sit down here. I'm going to send my message. And I realized standing behind me are a dozen of the best Morse radio operators in the world. And they're all listening. Oh man, please don't let me screw this up. And I guess I didn't, because they gave me a round of applause at the end. And man, I was thrilled by that. And here's one of the messages that I said on the proper radiogram blank, since it was coming from ITT station, the successor to Mackie Radio. And that's what we sent. And Tim Gorder, on the back of your commercial license, there's this is a ticket to a job, or it was. And you had to have, when you signed off a ship, you wanted to get the captain or the chief to sign the back of your license to say your service was satisfactory. That's it. It was just satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So I'm cornering Tim Gorder, who was the host of the event, and saying, Tim, okay, you got to sign my license here, that I was on duty at KFS on the last day of Morse. This is what the licenses look like. And here you see KPH KFS on 12 July 1999. But by 2000, we had the station back on the air, because this is the day we started our project. And Satisfactory by Jack Martini. So as you can imagine, to me, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. So back to our receive site here. Tom and I, Tom Horsfall, my co-founder, we had to say, okay, this cannot be let to pass. And this is now 2 years since operations closed at this site, at the Bolinas transmitter site and the Point Reyes receive site. And I had not been able to go back there. I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my career, but I was so emotionally involved with it that I could not force myself to go back because I'd been to so many of these abandoned radio stations. They're always vandalized, spray painted, trashed. And I just couldn't see that. I couldn't bring myself to do that. But we did go on that day. And there was a guard on the door because it hadn't been transferred to the Park Service yet. And we talked our way past the guard and we said, look, we're radio men, we're coming in. Why don't you just make it easy on everybody? So we go in there and we walk down the main hallway. And before I even get into this room that we see now, I hear static and I hear Morse code. I hear ships calling, and I know the place is closed for 2 years. So how can this be? Goose pimples start appearing. We walk in, and it was like they had left 20 minutes ago. And the last thing they did before they turned out the lights, lock the door, and walk away was to make sure that the receivers were still on, keeping a symbolic watch over the airwaves. And here's this Morse code that we're hearing. We saw that and we see, well, here we are. We're at the ears of the station. It's still living. It's still working. And the voice of the station in Bolinas, it's still existing. It's dark and cold. It's off the air, but it's still existing and the antennas are still there. And Tom and I look at each other. We say, well, you don't get your life's work handed to you on a silver platter like this very often. And we decided, okay, we're going to try and go ahead with this restoration to put the station back. All we had to do was convince the National Park Service because all of this, all the facilities, both transmit and receive, now became part of the Point Reyes National Seashore. So we put together a finely honed proposal and we met across a table with the senior staff of the Point Reyes National Seashore. And we slide, Tom and I, we slide our proposal over to them, beautiful proposals full of paragraphs and photos and with circles and arrows on the front and a paragraph on the back of each one saying what it was. And we see that they're not looking at the proposal. They're looking at Tom and they're looking at me in the eye. And we realize they're thinking, well, how crazy are these guys? I mean, are they crazy enough that they're going to stick with it over the long term, or are they too crazy and we're going to have a 5150 situation down the line to pry these guys out of here? And for some reason, they had the vision and the trust to tell us, yeah, go ahead. In fact, can you expand your proposal a little bit? And Tom and I are looking at each other, holy mackerel. Yeah, we can expand. Well, this is the transmitter gallery, the main transmitter gallery at Bolinas, almost as it was when we got there. As when we got there, it was just piles of trash down that central hallway. Just the place was dirty and neglected. But here you see the 1950s transmitters, the RCA brown radios, colors on the transmitters in the foreground, and then the 2 rows of Henry HF transmitters. So, okay, what are we going to do here? Well, let's start on the Henrys. They've only been abandoned in place for 2 years. The RCAs had been abandoned for 10 years. And the atmosphere in this room was basically open to the weather. And those of you know what coastal weather, it was salt air and all the rest of it. So we look in the back of the Henrys, and here's standing water from condensation. And we say, okay, this is fine. We can deal with this, and start drying and drying and drying. And we're, heating the thing up and, with sun lamps and just cleaning and cleaning. And we say, okay, you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, well, press the money button, the high voltage button. Oh, a big green flame shoots out the top. Literally true. And we say, okay, I guess we got more to do here. But we closed up the space, warmed everything up, got to know the transmitters very well. And now it became an almost easy task to bring them back and online. Then we turned our attention to the 1950s transmitters. Now, these were in such bad shape that you couldn't open the doors. These are sliding doors in the front, and you couldn't even move the tuning controls. They were just rusted. But now every one of these has been restored and is a fully good and working transmitter. Well, Tom and I would say we're in the business of crazy ideas, and what could be more crazy than bringing two World War II vintage press wireless PW15 15 kilowatt transmitters from the competing station's transmitter site in Palo Alto. That's the transmitter site that was on the air on that last day. In fact, turns out I was keying one of these transmitters. I didn't know it at the time. How about we go down and get a couple of those and bring them up to Bolinas and install them? What about that? How about a little bit of that? Well, we did it. Here they are on the lowboy trailer being dragged all the way up Highway 101. And here it is. Here, we brought two of them. This one is fully installed and it is operational on its original KFS 12 meg frequency. And I tell you, it gets back out better than the Henry transmitters. The same frequency band, same power level, same type of antenna, but man, this thing just gets out. Maybe it's something about 1942 watts. This is a 1942 vintage. And you see that we reverse engineered it to include the mercury vapor rectifiers. When we got it, they were all solid state, converted to solid state. But we reverse engineered it, had to put back all the filament transformers and all the rest of it. But we wanted to see those mercury vapor tubes flashing. And the other one, the 17 meg set, just to the right of this one, that's also undergoing restoration. So we'll have that on the air. Now, the one that really, really intimidated us was this H set. There's a bunch of them. And these are very sophisticated, independent sideband point-to-point transmitters and enormously complex mechanically and electrically and in horrible, horrible shape. As you can see, this is just one photo of all, but all the rest of the insides of the transmitters is what they looked like. And we just looked at that and we just closed the door. These all have big doors. You walk into the transmitter. And just closed the door. Said, okay, you can't. You can't. But then we were joined by a bunch of engineers from Hewlett Packard, and they're doing projects. They're doing a great job. And they're saying, well, we want something we can really sink our teeth into. We want something that we really can make a difference here. And so I said, well, okay, how about this? How about restoring an H set? And so they're called as H sets. And they said yes. Later, they said if they'd known what they were getting into, they would never have said yes. But they said yes, and it was too late for them. Well, here's that same panel as it looked after their rebuilding and restoration. It took them 3 years and 3,000 man hours. This is just one of so many before and after photos, just to give you an idea of the quality of the work they did. Here's the RF deck, a couple of ceramic tubes in the output. And they actually had to machine a new deck for the one below there because it was corroded through. And it had to be precisely all the where the sockets went and the through holes and all the rest of it had to be machined. This thing, when you look in the back of it now, it looks like it came from the factory. Amazing, amazing amount of work. Here's Steve Pizar, one of the H-set crew, tuning it up. We're getting it back on the air. It's on our 22 meg frequency. After the point-to-point ended, they converted a lot of these transmitters to Morse code for the ship-to-shore service. Now, here it is in 2013, Night of Nights, our annual event, Night of Nights, in July 12th, to commemorate that supposed last Morse message. We've got the thing on the air. Here's Cecily Muldoon, superintendent of the Point Reyes National Seashore. leaning in to press the money button, the high voltage button to put the thing on the air. And here you see me leaning in, and maybe you can see the thought bubble above my head. And if you can, you see that it says, "Please, God, don't let this thing catch on fire." But of course, there was no chance of that because the work that was done on it was just so superb. And as you can tell, they're all air cooled. They were water cooled transmitters on the site. They were gone by the time we got there. Everything is air cooled. So even on the dampest, darkest day in Bolinas, when these things are going and exhausting out into the transmitter gallery, it's always nice and toasty there. We moved several of the transmitters. Here's one of the Henrys. We moved several of the transmitters to amateur channels. Here's the 7 meg one under the call sign K6 KPH. Several of the 1950s transmitters are also on amateur channels as well. So we're on there every weekend while KPH and KFS commercial transmitters are on the air. We're on 3.5, 7, 14, 18, and 21. Working the hams, which is great. It's really fun. Some of the guys that you contact, you got to explain what's going on. Others are regular customers. They're there every weekend, and every once in a while you'll run into somebody who is a former Marine radio officer, like we have in the audience here tonight, and you know right away when you're hooking up with a professional, and that's super good. We had done events. Here is the receive site. Remember, we were looking at the postcard of that up in Marshall, and they allowed us to do events because we wanted to commemorate having the station controlled from where it was controlled in the 1920s. So we brought up, as you see, here's the Marconi Atalanta, by the way, the one that I bought all the way over on the left, 51J4, very rare CRM R6As, two of them. You hardly ever see one. And the panels between them that allowed us to control the transmitters in Bolinas from this site. This is one of the cottages, one of the engineers' cottages at the Marshall receive site. So this was big. We really thought, we did it a couple of years in a row. We thought this was pretty hot stuff. And here it is. This is it. This is it. This is the crystalline moment. This is what makes it all worthwhile. Here's Jack Martini on the left, Ray Smith on the right. The pillars of KPH. Frank Geisel called them his pillars of strength. Both these men are gone now, but here we see them pounding away just as they always did, using the same transmitters. It just was so meaningful. Keeping this station on the air, man, it's a big deal. The main thing is the antennas. Here is one of the big antenna jobs that we did. You see, it's all open wire line. It's all on wooden poles. Need the cranes and skilled people to get up there and rebuild this stuff. Takes a lot of money. The Park Service does kick in money. This is where all the donations that people send us, that's where it goes, is maintenance like this. And we're open every Saturday. You are more than invited. You can come up there and you don't even need an amateur license. You can sit on the amateur channels. If you have a commercial telegrapher's license, you can sit the circuit at KPH and KFS. And I have a special stamp. I will endorse your license as having been an operator at KPH and KFS or K6 KPH. When we do it for the commercial operators, my big joke is I hand the guy's license back and I say, this is good for employment at any U.S. coast station. And of course, this is the only one. Used to be you could take that piece of paper and your key and get a job almost anywhere. These are listing of our frequencies. They're on the website. You can check that out. We're also transmitting teletype. as well on 3 channels. And this is how the operating room looks now. And this is just a wonderful picture. We had 5 guys, including me. I'm up on the ladder taking the photo. But it was just like it was in the real days. And we consider it the real days. The message rack in the middle there has the messages to outgoing ships. Every 2 hours, the call letters go out of the ships you're holding traffic for, the traffic list, and then the deluge. Used to be the deluge when this was, everybody used Morse code, and you'd just be working one ship after the other, whip that message out of the message rack, send it to the guy. Got anything for me? Yeah, okay, give it to me. Boom, on to the next ship, on to the next ship. Very intense, very stressful. You had to be an excellent operator. And these were the best guys. So these are all our guys. And it was just like yesterday when it really gets running there. Well, I really thank you for your attention, for your very kind attention. And it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to be with you. Our website, radiomarine.org, tons of pictures, a lot more information. Feel free to jump over there or drop me a line. And again, thanks, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you this evening.
Absolutely fascinating. Now, does KPH do the ARL field day bulletin on the West Coast?
K6 KPH does, yes.
Right.
Yes, indeed. That's right. Thank you for bringing
I
that
thought I
up.
recognized the call sign.
Right, right. Yep.
Anybody else got any questions or answers or comments or whatever?
I look forward to seeing you hopefully sometime again this summer, Richard. You know, I've been at your station, I guess 3 or 4 times. It's been a while. I need to come visit you guys again.
Well, Tom, and anybody, drop me a line before you come, richard.dillman@gmail. And because we want to put on a special about, when somebody special makes the trip, we do what we call the A tour. And that means you, if you want, can also get to take a look at the transmitter site. I think, Tom, did you get down there to Bolinas?
Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I did what you guys then called the True Believer Tour.
All right.
Yeah. I guess you call it something different now, but
well, no, if you're a true believer, that's right. The true believers get the A tour. So that's the way that works. And you're all very welcome to do that, but give us a chance to let you know you're coming so we can make sure we can put on a good show for you.
Okay, anybody else? How we doing, Barry?
Doing good. Nothing in chat. I just made a comment. What you were talking, the stuff with the tapes looks like the old Twix machines.
Yeah, except it's 2-level, not 5-level, or Twix was
Right.
actually more than that. But yeah, it's the same idea. But
Test,
yeah.
test.
Yep.
Thank you. It was a great presentation, wonderful history, and just a joy to listen to you.
Well, that's high praise indeed. I really do appreciate it. It's my joy and my pleasure to talk about radio with guys who like to talk about radio. There's nothing better.
I will share a real quick story, and that is when I was in the Navy back in the 60s, I was in Vietnam, and they were bringing back into service Korean and World War II ships because they were needing them. The first ship I was stationed on was a back in service World War II ship, and what they did, they replaced 2 or 3, three of the transmitters with single sideband stuff. Everything else was original, just like it was in World War II. And because of, I got started as a teenager and I cut my teeth on World War II equipment. None of those guys knew how to operate that equipment. I just, I got some of this at home. And so it was kind of an interesting thing to step back in time and be meaningful with the old stuff.
Well, I definitely resonate with that. Tom Horsfall and I restored a Radio Marine 4U radio console from a Victory ship and installed it in working condition on the air at the San Francisco Maritime Museum. And as a result of that, being qualified on the 4U, I got to sail as RO on the Lane Victory in Southern California. And that was a great experience. And Tom, W1TP, I see you down there holding what looks to be a Enigma machine.
Yeah, and I enjoyed your transmissions with the Enigma code. I think I won the first contest because I was the only person to copy and use an original Enigma machine. But you guys are doing just the most wonderful job. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for Tom. And I just wanted to mention, Tom already has that we have once or twice a year a crypto event. So we send an encrypted message, and all the information that you need to decode it is available. And the star of the show was Tom actually doing it on a real Enigma. But so we do those several times a year. Those are all announced on our website as well.
Okay. Well, we've gone over an hour, but very pleasantly so. These are the kind of things that they could just go forever on. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thanks, guys. If you ever want to do the point-to-point one, I'm raring to go for that one too. But for
Okay.
now,
I
thank
think
you
we
so
can-
much,
Yes.
and really love being with you, and I'm honored by your invitation. So thank you.
And we're very glad you came. Thanks again. One last swing around. Anybody got any questions, comments? With that, I'm going to say 73s.